Hey, it's Fox from Inferno Fox Gaming. This one was inspired by Paige, aka Femtrooper, and what a spicy topic indeed. I've been playing jRPGs since Final Fantasy I came out back in 1990 here in the United States. While I've always enjoyed my time with them, there's been some things that I found off-putting over the years, because not every game, or heck, every genre is perfect. So let's get right into it, but again, quick reminder to like the video, hit that subscribe button, and ring that bell for notifications. It feels like everyone was singing high praises for 2024's Final Fantasy VII Rebirth. It is, indeed, a great game, although not without its blemishes. Besides the complete fumble of the last hour or so of the game, the other sore spot that I had with it were the plethora of mini-games. And yeah, I get that the OG had a lot of mini-games in it, especially with the part that Rebirth covers for the OG, but come on, did we really need 20 of these in Rebirth? There's plenty to do in the game as is. Now, I will admit the game itself does get a bit of a pass because all but one of these mini-games is skippable, including the Queen's Blood one that looked mandatory when Cloud and crew get on the boat section of the game. And I was getting worried about that because I was kind of getting Final Fantasy IX related flashbacks, because the 9th entry does have a required set of mini-games featuring its own card game, and it requires the player to win at least 2 matches before the story can progress. Ugh. Mini-games themselves can be fun and a great way to break up overall gameplay for jRPGs, but when they are improperly used or just overly abundant, they are a glaring distraction. Other examples of poorly executed mini-games include being forced into spots that break up the overall flow of the story, and really poorly at that, such as the snowboarding minigame right after Aerith's last scenes in the OG Final Fantasy VII. Another example is relying on blind luck, such as the dice game in Suikoden 1 and 2. And finally, having to manage the chows, KOs, whatever those things are, in Sonic Adventure 2 via the Chow Garden. I hated that and found it to be really tedious. Okay, that last one is a little bit of rage bait, but you get my overall theme. And I've mentioned this before in other videos, but fishing could be argued as a type of mini game, and its presence in jRPGs itself is just so overly done at this that there's really no point in mentioning it. Instead, I'll mention people say that the changed graphics styling of the action portion of ActRaiser Renaissance is what ruined that title. For me, though, it was the change from the simulation portion of the OG to it being akin to a tower defense style game that ruined ActRaiser Renaissance. While Renaissance was released in 2021, it was a sign of the times for said period, insofar as tower defense was really in vogue for a lot of jRPGs. Now, I am definitely grateful that the Ys series has avoided many of these minigame pitfalls. Though I will say tower defense is where the Ys series sort of skipped a beat, to where tower defense is sort of a pratfall for the Ys series, though specifically with the 8th and the 9th entries via the raids and the Grimwald Nox battles. Thankfully, these retain the overall battle structure and just meld the defense portion around it, but the core concept of it is still the same. It's just so tired at this point. We see this in other jRPGs though, such as 13 Sentinels Aegis Rim, though really the concept of tower defense itself is more a byproduct of defend the unit or defend the building from enemy incursion from more general tactical RPGs. I think tower defense is a more personal pet peeve of mine, born from forced gameplay of Clash Royale. Okay, peer pressure, it really got me into that, as well as Fort Condor gameplay in both the OG and Final Fantasy VII remakes. This was one that Paige mentioned in her video, and I oh so very much agree with this. These aren't necessarily mini games, mind you, and one of my best examples is the jet bike race in Chrono Trigger. But Fox, that part's awesome. How could you not like that? Because it's a literal and simple back and forth whose 40 seconds of length is determined by the literal last second avoidance of Johnny and use of a turbo. And worse, beating the race is required to get to the other end of the road. Oh, wait, it's not? You could have just walked through the labs? Funny thing is, I actually didn't know that until I replayed the game when it was released on the PS1. I, of course, played it on the Super Nintendo when it had originally come out in 1995. What got me to agree with this specific pet peeve was when Paige mentioned when jRPGs implement stealth into their games. And her mentioning that gave me flashbacks of Wind Waker's awful Forsaken Fortress section right in the beginning of that damn game. Now, one of my favorite games that I played through recently, Ys 10 Nordics, was also guilty of this too at one point in the game. And it was really only one part where stealth was required. And what was nice about this, though, after the third time that I failed the stealth, because again, I hate stealth, the game asked me if I wanted to just skip the stealth section and proceed the story, and I'm like, yes, please. It makes me wish other jRPGs had this, or at least all future ones continue to provide that option. Many jRPGs allow party members to deploy attacks or spells that also carry status effects on them, such as poison, mute, or paralyze. While these can often be effective on standard enemy fodder, they're often overkill, as deploying something like poison usually won't see the player reap its benefit before the standard army itself is destroyed in battle. What sucks is when these status effects almost never, ever work on bosses. And these are usually the type of battles that would be great for them. And this is almost always the case in primary series like Final Fantasy or Dragon Quest. Oh, but those bosses, they can and will make use of these status effects on your player's party. And in games like Fantasian, Neo Dimension, they make boss fights absolutely unwinnable unless the player knows exactly what status effects to look out for in a fight. And yeah, there are status effect nullifying accessories within this particular game, but again, the player won't know what accessories to equip until they either read a guide, fail at the first battle, or possibly scrape by the skin of their teeth and win. One nice thing with Fantasian is that the bosses actually are susceptible to status effects themselves, though again, unless the player would have read a guide prior to fighting the boss explicitly stating which effect to use, or go trial by error, it sort of doesn't really matter at that point. And this is something I actually feel the Trails series itself does a great job of balancing, as well as informing the player of. When fighting enemies or even bosses in many, if not all, the Trails series games, after using an Analyze Art or Craft, it'll show at what percentage a status effect would prove useful. I've mentioned this in other videos, but the awful Final Fantasy XIII is to thank for popularizing this. Because of the source, the stagger bar is something that just annoys me to no end, though in reality it really depends on how the game deploys this mechanic. When a game uses this mechanic in such a way that the player must focus on filling the bar itself versus depleting the enemy's health bar, that's when I feel gameplay-wise it's missed the plot. Final Fantasy VII Remake got to be this way a number of times, though I did think that Rebirth wasn't quite as bad with this. Now again, I'm going to mention this series, the Trail series, has a sort of stagger bar mechanic, though I feel like it's well balanced enough to when this break bar is filled, the enemy is just stunned, allowing maybe a free hit or two. And another game that has this is Clair Obscur Expedition 33, follows it in the same way as well. And then you have kind of the leaning more towards the stagger bar way with games like Tales of Arise, among other entries in the Tales series, seem to use it. And I'm not really a fan of it leaning towards that heavy stagger bar way. I look at jRPGs as player versus enemy. Whoever has the hit points depleted first wins. Having another bar to deplete on top of the HP sort of kind of misses the point. These are but a few of many pet peeves I personally have with jRPGs. Are they enough for me to completely stop playing these games? Heck no, but maybe some with too much stealth. They also are what make jRPGs what they really are, and honestly, I love them, warts and all. Now, let me know, guys, what are some of your worst pet peeves you have with jRPGs? I'd really like to hear it in the comments section below, as well as your thoughts on what I mentioned my pet peeves are. Otherwise, beyond that, thank you so much for watching, and hope that you have a great day.